How's it going, and welcome back to the Coffee Scotch Esports Show. I'm your host, Bowman Shota, and today we're going to be talking about professionalism in esports. There's been a lot of news articles over the last 6 months, roughly, that have just basically put esports in a bad limelight. And there's lots of talk about, this obviously is one of the esports' biggest years yet. We've reached $500 million, and we're going to be closing in on $1 billion probably next year, honestly. And so it's one of those things where there's lots and lots of more people looking at the esports scene and trying to figure out what is esports. You see articles on BBC and the CNN and Good Morning America where they're like, what is esports? What are we doing here? What is this going to be? And what does it mean? And it's all well and good that we're having those conversations and those news articles are going because it brings positive light to us. But a lot of times also they're being coincided with, there's doping going on, or there's match fixing, or there's, cheating, or there's all these other connotations. And it begs the question, when are we gonna grow up a little bit, essentially, and become more professional in how we handle our business? Now, not to say there aren't people doing that. There's plenty of teams, plenty of orgs who are handling their business in a very professional manner. But unfortunately, at this stage of growth in the scene where we want that mainstream attention, we got the E-League going on, we got different things like ESPN's being, getting more and more active involved. We have lots of more eyes on the esports scene, from top to bottom, from news and all the way up to the government regulation. There's lots of things going on that it's important that we take extra steps to be a little more professional. And as you see over here, to my left, there's a couple teams that have kind of stood out recently, or a couple organizations, because these aren't all teams, obviously. The first one is not a team, it's an organization, where having someone just like proofread an article you're about to post, or proofread a statement, or giving it to your lawyer just to say, hey, am I going to shoot myself in the foot if I say this publicly? Taking those small steps, isn't being cagey or sneaky or anything. It's being professional. It's making sure you're not having a foot and mouth syndrome. Because, we've all had the moment where, in the days of the cell phones now with the touch screens, where you're typing out a text message or a tweet and you fat finger a K and it turns into L when you're just trying to complain about your day, and now you're saying, this day is licking my ass. But in reality, we want to say this day is kicking my ass. And those little things happen all the time, and that's why it's extra important. That's why we have editors. That's why we have different people, lawyers and PR people who can step in and just be like, hey, you probably want to change that L to a K so it sounds right, so it doesn't sound inappropriate, like you're licking your ass, essentially. So professionalism matters. And the first case with the WESA, World Esports Association. Now, whether or not they planned to come out, a month ago, or they, it was rushed because of the leaked photo, or whatever they did, it was a nightmare as far as their PR campaign, because you had multiple executives within the organization contradicting each other with their answers, and they were being evasive, and it was very frustrating because they were trying to convince us of one thing while all the evidence pointed towards something else of ESL's involvement in the organization. And it just was handled terribly. And it was one of those things where if they probably would have taken a minute and got an opinion as far as what they were going to say, and actually take the time to either have a PR rep or even a lawyer just go, hey, this is what we want to say. We all want to be coming off from the same front. These are our goals. This is how we want to say it. They probably would have had a successful launch, leak or no leak, if they would have just taken that extra time to do that. It's all well and good to have a press release. It's all well and good to have a Reddit AMA. But if you don't do it in a professional manner, or you're at least not consistent, especially if you have multiple people, going to be giving out information, everyone has to be on point. Everyone has to be behind the company, tagline and everything like that. And, some people might cry out, be like, oh, why aren't you need to be honest and open up front? And you can be in a professional manner, which means you're spelling things correctly. You have proper grammar. If you're writing something in English and English isn't your first language, you should probably have someone whose English is their first language proofread it, just in case, so you don't have, non-sentences or bad spelling, or you're using the wrong there. We all know English is a terribly confusing language because multiple words sound the same, but they're spelled all different and they mean all different things. So it's one of those things where taking that extra minute to get someone to proofread what you're doing, to get someone to double check what you're saying, and not saying it has to be all PG, because obviously, I've already ruined that with this video, but it has to be on point. It has to be correct and has to be done well. So communication is huge. Twitter is one of those things where there's lots of debate on whether or not you need to be professional or not on Twitter, and some people are rude on Twitter, but there's a way to even be rude or snarky or sarcastic on Twitter without ruining your reputation either. So, I know just the other day, a Teams player tweeted out something about rape, and it was very inappropriate, and thankfully got taken down, and the team owner got involved to take it down. But there should be lessons on every team for your players saying, you're now in the public eye, you need to make sure you're not saying these types of things. And if you think you shouldn't say it, or you think it might be an issue, just don't do it. There should be those guidelines, and there should be small penalties like, hey, you made a rape joke on Twitter. That's $500 out of your next paycheck as a fine. That should be written into the contract, because they are now a PR machine. Esports players are now icons in the community, and they're heavily scrutinized and heavily watched. And you see, individual players, their Twitter followers explode because they're a professional gamer now, and there's lots of people watching them. So it's good to be professional, but it's also good to make sure you're taking the time to teach people right. So another good example is with Temple Storm. We also seen the news. Temple Storm recently sold their Counter-Strike team to Immortals, and that was not done as a first option. They honestly didn't want to sell their Counter-Strike team. The team owner, though, unfortunately, and you gotta make sure you double check and read all the news articles. There's some confusion around this, because basically the confusion around it and the headlines you see is Temple Storm's owner supposedly got screwed out of his team being an E-League, Turner's E-League, because of a Skype call he hung up on, which when you find out the truth, you realize that it's the Skype call and the E-League are actually two separate completely conversations. And the only conjoining point is the WME, which is a talent agency that ended up partnering with Turner and the E-League to get everything organized talent-wise and people-wise. But the Skype call that was in question actually happened before the whole E-League was a thing, when they were recruiting for the E-League thing, where the Temple Storm owners made a decision because he saw who was going to be on the phone call, on the Skype call, and had bad experience with those two individuals, not necessarily WME, but with those two individuals who happened to be calling on behalf of WME at that time, and decided just to hang up the call and not deal with them, which is a little bit unprofessional. But at the same time, this is the point I'm trying to drive, is we need to start acting a little more unprofessional. In the limelight, you're going to have to deal with people you don't like. You're going to have to deal with people who are frustrating to work with, who just make you want to pull your hair out of your head. But at the same time, to be professional means you can handle that situation to where it doesn't come off as if they're getting under your skin, and you can even dismiss them. And if you need to, you can dismiss them rudely, but in a way that still makes you look professional. Like in that instance, I would have answered that Skype call and been like, hey guys, I didn't realize I was going to be talking with you guys. Is there anyone else part of your organization that I could work with, because I don't feel comfortable working with you two because of these issues we've had in the past, and I think it would be everyone's best interest if there was someone else I could talk to at your organization, so that way we can actually grow a future relations, and maybe something that we can talk through and get through down the road. But as of right now, I really don't feel comfortable talking to you two individuals. So if that's kind of where I'm stand. So if we want to reschedule this, so that way we can move forward in a different direction with different people, that'd be great. So that's a way he could have handled it that would have solved that situation. Now, it had nothing to do with the E-League. The E-League happened to be a completely separate, issue where the commissioner is the one who decides the teams. It's just that the stories got mixed up in the news. But as far as the situation, as far as hanging up a Skype call, like little habits like that, you just gotta get past on an individual level. You gotta be more professional. You gotta talk to these individuals, even if you don't want to, even if you really want to hang up on them. Like, it's like dealing with a telemarketer. It's a heck of a lot easier instead of hanging up to just be like, you know what, sir or madam, I'm really not interested in what you're offering, so I'm going to be hanging up now. And you hang up immediately at that point, but you at least tell them you're going to hang up. So at least you give them the courtesy of, hey, I'm not interested. They get the hint that you don't want them to call them back, and they don't just think it's an accidental disconnect, when they might call you back later. So it's one of those things, it's a professional courtesy you have to extend. The third one over on the left here is Renegades. And the reason I bring up Renegades is because the whole them having to sell their LCS spot, along with the other teams that had to sell their LCS spots in League of Legends. And it was a situation where there was a lot of lack of professionalism on a lot of people's parts. And unfortunately, we don't know all the details. But it's one of those things where somewhere at some point someone wasn't doing a good professional job, to where someone got offended or spurred the wrong way, to where information got leaked or evidence was provided to Riot, and then Riot made their decisions. And on Riot's side, it was very unprofessional on how they handled their situation as well, because they were just basically like, you're all banned, get out of here, sell your teams, you got 10 days to do it, you're done. Which, that's fine and all, if that's the decision based on the evidence, cool. But like, they should have at least sat down with these organizations like the day they were going to make the announcement and be like, here's the evidence we were provided, okay, and this is why you have to sell your team. So get your stuff together and move out. It should have been given as a professional courtesy, at least on that point. And I understand they cited the reasons. They didn't provide evidence because they didn't want any backlash against those individuals who stepped forward with that evidence, which is okay. I get that. But at the same time, even a courtesy call should have been given out to these teams prior to the announcement. Like, there should have been some sort of communication prior to the public announcement that these teams are banned, because that's kind of a backwards way to do this, and it's really unprofessional in the sense of how you handle certain things. Like, in my day-to-day life, if we have to cancel someone's service for the day, we always give them a call at least the day before when we find out something's going to happen, like whether they're behind on their payments or they're, or something's going on. Like, there's always an email, a phone call, some sort of communication, with a proper template, with a proper phrasing, to make sure that it is communicated exactly why something's happening and why something, certain services aren't going to be rendered towards them if they're at fault. Like, it's one of those common courtesy things you got to do. And Riot now is, over 7 years old. Yes, they started out with 13 or 17 individuals when they first created League of Legends, and now they're over 3,000, which is exciting growth. But there's got to be someone on that team who says, hey, this is probably a bad PR move. And maybe they think that because they make so much money and they're the number one game in the world and they're number one esport, that it doesn't matter, because they can essentially be the end all be all as far as all decisions, and no one can touch them because they're the biggest. Which I get that mentality to a point, but at the same time, you still have to appeal to your crowd to a point. You still have to publicly at least make it seem like you're appealing or making your customers happy. But when a lot of your customers aren't happy, you're missing something there. So overall, to kind of drive home the points I'm trying to make is taking a little extra time out of your day, or hiring someone to do that for you, to make sure anything you're going to be doing in the public eye comes off in a professional light. It doesn't always have to be in a positive light, because sometimes we have to give bad news and we have to give it publicly. But at the same time, at least if we're doing it in a professional manner, so that way at the end of the day, when someone looks at it and they go, hey, yeah, that was harsh, but it wasn't rude. It wasn't bad. It wasn't untasteful. It wasn't ridiculous. It wasn't stupid or anything like that. It was bad, but it was also done in a professional manner. They checked all their, they crossed all their T's, dotted all their I's, etc. So be professional. It's really becoming a bad thing going forward, and we want esports to grow, and we want esports to grow positively, but we also want it to grow right. We want it to be done in a professional manner, and there's too many instances recently, or at least in the news recently. They've probably happened a lot more than we see in the news, where if someone would have just taken the extra 5 minutes to be professional, to check with someone in PR, to reference a lawyer, something, we could have alleviated a lot of headaches. We could not have these negative news articles hurting the esports scene. So like, share, favorite, subscribe as you see fit. Check out more great content on esports.online. And if you're in the mood for a challenge, go check out esportshero.com. I'm Bowman Shota. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.